They laughed when the poor mechanic ignored $100 job to help a girl who looked like she had nothing, and no one in that garage knew that silence was coming. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow across oil-stained concrete as Ethan Cole wiped his hands on a worn rag. His knuckles cracked, his shirt damp from a long Texas morning that hadn't given him a single break. "You serious right now?" The customer snapped, waving his keys. "I've been waiting 20 minutes. Ethan didn't answer right away, his eyes drifting past the man, past the polished truck, to the edge of the lot where an old sedan sat crooked, but slightly open, steam curling into the dry air like a quiet cry for help. Beside it stood a woman, simple dress, no makeup worth mentioning, hands clasped like she was apologizing just for being there. "She was here first," Ethan said calmly. The man scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She can't even afford a tow. Man, you're losing money." Ethan set the rag down slowly, the metal clink of a wrench hitting the table echoing just a bit longer than it should have. "Money's not everything," he said. The shop fell into a strange rhythm, voices lowering, a radio humming somewhere in the background, the scent of motor oil thick in the heat. Ethan walked toward the woman, each step steady, unhurried, like a man who didn't need approval to know what was right. "Car giving you trouble?" he asked gently. She looked up, her eyes sharp for just a second before softening again. "It just stopped," she said, voice quiet, almost careful. I don't have much." Ethan nodded once, already lifting the hood, already reaching for his tools. "Let's take a look first," he replied. Behind him, the laughter started again, low, dismissive, but it didn't reach him, not really. The engine ticked softly as it cooled, the faint hiss of pressure escaping like a held breath finally letting go. And for a moment, everything slowed, the world shrinking down to a broken car, a tired man, and a stranger who didn't expect kindness anymore. Ethan leaned in, eyes scanning, fingers moving with quiet precision, and he didn't notice the way she watched him, not like the others did, not with judgment, but with something deeper, something measuring. "You're not even gonna charge her, are you?" someone called out. Ethan didn't look back. "We'll figure that out later," he said. And in that small, almost invisible moment, a choice was made, one that would echo far louder than anyone in that room could possibly imagine. The wrench clicked into place, the loose line tightened, and the engine gave a soft, steady hum as if it had been waiting for someone to listen instead of judge. "Try it now," Ethan said, stepping back, his voice calm, almost quiet enough to disappear under the hum of the shop. The woman slid into the driver's seat, her movements simple, unassuming, and when she turned the key, the car came back to life without hesitation. A few heads turned, not impressed, just surprised it had been that easy. She stepped out slowly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, eyes lingering on him longer than necessary. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, her tone careful, like the question mattered more than the answer. Ethan shook his head, already wiping his hands again. It was a loose fuel line. 10-minute fix. "You are good." A pause. No charge. The silence that followed was different this time. Not loud, not mocking, just still. "Come on, man." The same customer called out from across the garage, laughing under his breath. "You running a charity now?" Ethan did not turn around. "Just doing my job," he replied. The woman studied him, her gaze sharper now, like she was searching for something beneath the grease, beneath the worn shirt, beneath the quiet. "That is not your job," she said softly. Ethan looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time fully. Helping people is always part of the job. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The overhead lights flickered slightly. The radio crackled into a country song about lost roads and second chances, and outside, the late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the cracked pavement. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small envelope, thick, deliberate, and held it toward him. "Please," she said, "at least take this." Ethan glanced at it, then back at her, then shook his head again. "If it is more than what the repair is worth, I do not want it." "You have not even looked," she pressed, a hint of something new in her voice now, something testing. "I do not need to," he answered. "Fair is fair." Another pause, longer this time. The laughter in the garage had faded completely now, replaced by a quiet curiosity. The woman slowly lowered the envelope, her fingers tightening slightly, as if she was not used to hearing no. Most people would take it, she said. Ethan gave a small, almost tired smile. Most people are trying to prove something. She tilted her head. And you are not. He looked past her for a second, toward the corner of the lot where a small, faded bicycle leaned against the wall, a pink helmet hanging from its handle. I already know who I am, he said. The air shifted again, subtle but undeniable, like something invisible had just been placed on the scale and changed the weight of everything in the room. She followed his gaze, noticing the bike, the little details, the life behind the man, and when she looked back at him, there was no pretense left in her eyes, only quiet recognition. But she said nothing more, only nodded once, as if marking something down in a place no one else could see, and in that quiet moment, the test had only just begun. The envelope stayed in her hand a second longer before she slowly slipped it back into her bag, but something in her expression had changed, not disappointment, not confusion, something quieter, something more deliberate. Then let me ask you something, she said, her voice steadier now, less uncertain. Ethan picked up another tool, already turning back toward the workbench. Go ahead. She stepped closer, just enough to lower her voice beneath the hum of the garage. Why help me at all? 3 words. Simple, but they hung in the air like they carried more weight than they should. Ethan paused, just for a breath, then continued tightening a bolt that did not really need tightening. Because you needed it, he answered. That is it, she pressed. He nodded once. That is enough. Behind them, someone chuckled again, but softer this time, less confident. The rhythm of the shop had shifted, like even the noise knew something was unfolding. She studied him again, longer now, her eyes tracing the quiet details, the worn edges of his sleeves, the steady pace of his hands, the absence of urgency, the absence of performance. Most people would have asked questions, she said. Where you came from, why you could not pay, what you could offer in return. Ethan shrugged lightly. Most people are afraid of being taken advantage of. She tilted her head slightly. And you are not. He finally looked at her again, calm, direct. If someone needs help, and I can help, then I already have enough. The words settled into the space between them, not loud, not dramatic, but firm in a way that did not need to be proven. She exhaled slowly, almost like she had been holding that breath for a long time. What if I told you this was a test? She asked, watching him carefully. Ethan did not react the way she expected. He did not frown, did not question, did not laugh. He simply wiped his hands again and said, Then I guess you got your answer. A small silence followed, deeper this time, stretching just long enough to make the world outside feel distant. The late sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow through the open garage door, catching dust in the air like tiny suspended moments. She glanced around the shop, at the men who had stopped pretending not to listen, at the customer who now stood quietly with his keys in hand, no longer impatient, just waiting. Then her eyes moved back to Ethan. You have a daughter, she said, not as a question. Ethan's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Yeah. She rides that bike? She nodded toward the corner. He followed her gaze and allowed himself a faint smile. Every afternoon, rain or shine. And you still chose to give away work you could have charged for? She asked. Ethan leaned against the workbench, just slightly, the first sign of rest he had shown all day. I am not raising her to think everything has a price. The words landed heavier than anything before, not because they were loud, but because they were true. She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her eyes finally settled, like a decision being made somewhere deep and quiet. I see, she said. And for the first time since she had arrived, there was no act left in her voice, only clarity, only purpose, and somewhere beyond the edge of the lot, unseen, a black SUV slowed just enough to notice the garage before continuing past, as if the world itself had started paying attention. The sound of a car door closing echoed softly from the edge of the lot, but inside the garage, no one turned, not yet, because something quieter was already holding their attention. So what happens now? She asked, her voice steady, almost curious in a way that no longer needed to pretend. Ethan picked up a small cloth, wiping a clean line across the edge of the hood, as if finishing a job he had already decided was done. Now you drive, he said simply. She did not move right away. And if I come back? He glanced at her briefly, then back at his tools. Then I will fix whatever is broken. A faint smile touched her lips, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by something more thoughtful, more intentional. Even if it is not a car, she pressed. The question lingered, soft but deliberate. Ethan paused, just for a moment, the cloth still in his hand. Depends, he said. Some things are not meant to be fixed. Just understood. The garage fell quiet again, not awkward, not tense, just aware. She nodded slowly, like she was storing every word, every reaction, every silence. You are different, she said. No, Ethan replied gently. I am just not trying to be anything else. Behind them, the same customer shifted his weight, clearing his throat, but the impatience was gone now, replaced by something closer to respect, though he would not say it out loud. The woman took a step back, her eyes scanning the space one more time, the worn tools, the faded signs, the small details that told a story no one had bothered to read before. Then she turned, walking toward her car, but her steps slowed as she reached the driver door. She placed her hand on the handle, then stopped, looking back over her shoulder. Ethan, she said, speaking his name for the first time. He looked up. Yes. What if someone offered you a way out of all this? She asked, gesturing lightly around the garage, the heat, the noise, the long hours written into every surface. Better money, easier life, less struggle. Ethan leaned back slightly against the workbench, considering her, not the offer, but the question behind it. I would ask what it costs, he said. She held his gaze. And if it costs nothing? Hey. Small pause. Then Ethan smiled, not wide, not performative, just real. Then it probably costs everything. The words settled like dust in sunlight, quiet but impossible to ignore. She nodded once more, slower this time, as if confirming something final in her mind. Thank you, she said, and this time, it sounded different, not polite, not expected, but sincere in a way that carried weight. She opened the door and sat inside, the engine starting with a smooth, confident hum, but she did not drive off immediately. For a second, her hands rested on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed forward, as if aligning two worlds that had just briefly crossed. Then, without another word, she pulled away from the garage, the car rolling slowly toward the road, sunlight catching the glass just enough to blur her expression from view. Inside, the garage remained still, the usual noise returning in fragments, a radio turning up, tools shifting, someone finally stepping forward to hand over keys. But something had changed, something none of them could quite name yet. And across the street, parked just out of sight, a black SUV idled quietly, its tinted windows reflecting the fading light, waiting, watching, as if the real story had only just begun. The sun had dipped lower by the time Ethan finally closed the hood on the last car, the heat of the day settling into a quieter, golden stillness that stretched across the emptying lot. And for a moment, he just stood there, hands resting on cool metal, as if the silence itself was something worth holding on to. Daddy. A small voice called from the sidewalk, light, familiar, and full of life that had not yet learned to measure the world in dollars. Ethan turned, and there she was, Lily, her pink helmet slightly crooked, her little bicycle wobbling just a bit as she stopped near the garage entrance. You are late, she said, not accusing, just stating it the way children do. Ethan smiled, softer than he had all day. Busy day, he replied, walking over and crouching down to her level. Did you ride all the way here? She nodded proudly. All by myself. He adjusted her helmet gently, his hands careful, practiced, the kind of care that came from years of doing everything alone. That is my girl, he said. Inside the garage, the last of the workers clocked out, voices fading, engines going silent one by one until only the faint hum of evening traffic remained. Across the street, the black SUV was still there, engine low, unseen by most, but not by everyone. Lily glanced around, her eyes catching everything the way only a child could. Who was that lady? She asked suddenly. Ethan paused. What lady? The one who kept looking at you like she knew you, Lily said, matter of fact. Ethan let out a small breath, almost a laugh. Just someone who needed help. Lily considered that for a second, then nodded like it made perfect sense. You always help people, she said. Ethan stood up slowly, resting a hand on her shoulder. I try. The sky shifted into deeper shades of orange and blue, the kind of evening that made everything feel quieter than it really was. like the world itself was taking a breath. Then, from down the road, the soft, unmistakable sound of multiple engines approached, smooth, controlled, not loud but powerful in a way that did not need to announce itself. Ethan did not react at first. He was used to noise, to traffic, to the constant movement of a city that never really stopped. But Lily noticed. "Daddy," she whispered, pointing. 3 black SUVs turned into the lot, one after another, tires rolling slowly over cracked pavement, perfectly aligned, perfectly timed, like something out of place in a world that had never asked for it. The vehicles came to a stop, doors opening in quiet unison, and for a moment, no one spoke, not Ethan, not Lily, not even the wind that seemed to pause just long enough to watch. A man in a tailored suit stepped out first, scanning the area with calm precision, followed by another, then another, until the space that had once held laughter and doubt was now filled with something else entirely. Lily looked up at Ethan, her voice small but steady. "Are they here for you?" Ethan did not answer right away. His eyes moved from the vehicles, to the men, to the final door that had not yet opened. And when it finally did, and she stepped out, no longer pretending, no longer hiding, the air itself seemed to shift, as if the truth had finally decided it was time to be seen, and in that moment, the entire world felt like it was holding its breath. The door closed behind her with a soft, controlled click, and in that single sound, everything she had been hiding seemed to fall away. Gone was the uncertainty, the quiet hesitation, replaced by a presence that did not need to ask for attention because it commanded it without effort. Her posture was straighter now, her steps measured, her eyes no longer searching but knowing. "Miss Hayes," one of the suited men said, his voice respectful, precise. She gave a slight nod, then looked past them, directly at Ethan. The distance between them had not changed, but something else had, something invisible yet undeniable. Lily tightened her grip on Ethan's hand. "Daddy," she whispered. Ethan placed his hand gently over hers, steady, reassuring, even as his eyes remained fixed on the woman who had just stepped out of a world far beyond his own. "You came back," he said, his voice calm, not surprised, not impressed, just certain. Charlotte Hayes walked forward slowly, the sound of her heels soft against the pavement, each step deliberate, each second stretching just a little longer than it should. "I said I might," she replied. The men behind her remained still, silent, like the world itself had paused to give this moment space. "You did not mention all this," Ethan said, glancing briefly at the vehicles, then back at her. Charlotte followed his gaze, then returned it, her expression unreadable for just a second before softening. "You did not ask," she said. A faint breeze moved through the lot, carrying with it the last warmth of the day, the faint scent of oil and dust, the quiet memory of everything that had happened just hours before. Lily looked between them, her eyes wide, curious, but not afraid. "Are you important?" she asked suddenly, her voice clear in the stillness. A few of the men shifted slightly, uncertain how to react, but Charlotte did not hesitate. She stepped closer, lowering herself just enough to meet Lily's gaze. "Not in the way that matters," she said gently. Lily tilted her head. "My dad says being kind matters." Charlotte's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "Your dad is right." She stood again, her attention returning to Ethan, but something in her expression had changed, not testing anymore, not measuring, but recognizing. "I owe you more than a thank you," she said. Ethan shook his head lightly. "You do not owe me anything." "That is where you are wrong," she replied, her voice calm but firm. She turned slightly, and one of the men stepped forward, holding out a sleek folder, the kind that did not belong in a place like this. "I built something," she continued, her eyes never leaving Ethan's. "A company, a life, a world where everything has value, everything has a price." She paused, just long enough for the weight of those words to settle. "And today, I realized something was missing." The air grew quieter, heavier, like the moment before a storm that never needed to arrive. Ethan crossed his arms loosely, not defensive, not closed off, just listening. "And what is that?" he asked. Charlotte took the folder, but did not open it. Instead, she held it at her side, as if what mattered was not inside it, but what had already been proven. "Someone who does not measure worth in dollars," she said. "Someone who does not change when the world changes around him." Her gaze softened slightly. Someone like you. The words hung there. Simple, direct, impossible to misunderstand. Behind her, the men remained silent. The vehicle still, the entire scene suspended in a kind of quiet that no one dared to break. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then at Lily, then back at her again. And when he finally spoke, his voice was steady, unchanged. I am not for sale. The silence that followed was deeper than anything before, not shocked, not confused, just absolute. As if in that one sentence, everything she had built, everything she had expected, had met something it could not move. The words did not echo, they did not need to, because they landed exactly where they were meant to, and for the first time since she arrived, Charlotte Hayes did not have an answer ready. One of the men behind her shifted slightly, as if preparing to step in, to correct, to smooth over what they assumed was a misunderstanding, but she raised her hand just enough to stop him without looking. I am not trying to buy you, she said, her voice softer now, but no less steady. Ethan did not move. That is what it sounds like, he replied. A brief silence followed, not tense, not hostile, but honest in a way that made everything else feel unnecessary. The evening air cooled around them, the light fading just enough to blur the sharp edges of the day, leaving only shapes, silhouettes, and truth. Charlotte took a slow breath, as if recalibrating something deeper than words. Then let me say it differently, she continued. I am not offering you money. I am offering you a choice. Ethan tilted his head slightly, not dismissive, not interested, just listening. What kind of choice? He asked. She glanced at Lily for a moment, then back at him. A chance to give her more, she said. Better schools. Safer neighborhoods. Opportunities you cannot build alone from here. The words were not cruel, not condescending, but they carried a weight that pressed quietly against everything Ethan had spent years holding together. Lily looked up at him, her small hand still wrapped around his, trusting without question. Ethan knelt down slowly, bringing himself to her level, his voice gentle. You like our house? He asked. Lily nodded immediately. It is small, but it is ours. He smiled faintly. And your school? My teacher says I read really good, she said proudly. Ethan looked back at Charlotte then, rising to his feet again, something in his posture unchanged, unmoved. She already has everything she needs, he said. Charlotte held his gaze, searching, not for weakness, but for truth, and finding something she had not expected. Everything? She asked quietly. Ethan nodded once. Everything that matters. The garage stood behind him, quiet now, lights dimming, the day officially over, but the moment far from it. Charlotte stepped closer, just enough to close the distance without crossing it. You think I do not understand that? She asked. You think I built everything I have by chasing money? Ethan did not answer right away. The wind moved lightly through the lot, carrying with it the faint sound of distant traffic, the world continuing as if nothing extraordinary was happening here. I think, he said finally, that somewhere along the way, you forgot what cannot be built. The words were not sharp, but they cut through something deeper than pride. Charlotte's expression shifted, just slightly, a flicker of something unguarded passing through her eyes before it settled again. And you think you remember? She asked. Ethan looked at Lily, then back at her. I do not have the luxury of forgetting. Another silence followed, heavier now, filled with things neither of them needed to say out loud. Behind Charlotte, the men remained still, uncertain, witnessing something they could not control, something that did not follow rules they understood. Charlotte lowered her gaze for just a second, then lifted it again, clearer now, steadier. Then maybe this is not about changing you, she said. Maybe it is about understanding you. Ethan did not respond, but the way he stood, the way he did not step back, did not step forward, said enough. And in that quiet space between them, where no deal had been made, no agreement reached, something else began to form, something slower, something stronger, something neither of them had planned, and for the first time, it was not about wealth, or power, or proving anything at all. It was about truth, and the kind of respect that could only exist when nothing was being asked in return. The night settled in quietly, the last light slipping behind the buildings as the garage stood in a kind of stillness that felt almost sacred, like something important had already happened and no one wanted to disturb it. Charlotte did not move right away. She stood there, facing Ethan, the distance between them unchanged, but the space now filled with something neither power nor money could define. All my life, she said slowly, her voice no longer carrying authority, but reflection, people said yes to me before I even finished asking. Ethan said nothing. Doors opened, she continued. Deals closed. People smiled, agreed, followed. And I thought that meant I was building something real. A faint breeze passed through, lifting a loose strand of her hair, softening the edges of a woman who, for the first time, did not seem in control of the outcome. But today, she said, her eyes steady on his, you said no without hesitation, without fear, without needing anything in return. Ethan shifted slightly, not uncomfortable, just grounded. That is not special, he said. It should be normal. Charlotte let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it, only truth. It is not, she replied. The men behind her remained silent, their presence now irrelevant, like shadows in a story that had moved beyond them. Lily tugged gently at Ethan's sleeve. Daddy, she whispered, is she sad? Ethan glanced down at her, then back at Charlotte, his voice calm. No, he said softly. She is learning. Charlotte heard it, and for a moment, something in her expression softened even more, something unguarded, something human. She took another step forward, closing the gap just enough to speak without distance. I was not looking for someone to impress, she said. I was not looking for someone to control. Her voice steadied, clearer now, like she had finally reached the truth she had been searching for all along. I was looking for someone who would not change when everything around them does. The words settled into the quiet like a final piece falling into place. Ethan met her gaze, unwavering. Then you found what you were looking for, he said. Another pause. Not empty, not uncertain, but full. Charlotte nodded once, slowly, accepting something deeper than a simple answer. She looked around the garage one last time, the worn walls, the tools, the life built not on opportunity but on choice, on discipline, on quiet dignity. Then she turned back to him. I do not want to take you away from this, she said. I want to understand how you built it. Ethan studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. It is not complicated, he said. You just do the right thing, even when no one is watching. Charlotte held that thought, letting it settle, letting it challenge everything she had known. The air grew still again, deeper this time, like the world itself had leaned in to listen. Then, slowly, she extended her hand, not as a gesture of power, not as an offer, but as something simpler. Then maybe, she said quietly, you could show me. Ethan looked at her hand, then at her, then at Lily, who watched with wide, hopeful eyes. And in that moment, there was no audience, no status, no difference between them, only a choice. And when Ethan finally reached out, not to accept anything, not to gain anything, but simply to acknowledge what was real, the silence that followed was not empty, it was complete. The night did not rush them. It simply settled around them, wrapping the moment in a quiet that felt earned, not forced. And as Ethan's hand met Charlotte's, there was no transaction, no expectation, only recognition. The men behind her remained still, uncertain now not because they lacked instruction, but because for the first time, nothing needed to be controlled. Charlotte lowered her hand slowly, not withdrawing, just letting the moment breathe. I spent years building something people would respect, she said, her voice calm, no longer searching for validation. But I never realized respect cannot be bought, only witnessed. Ethan glanced at Lily, who still stood close, her small hand resting against his side like an anchor that never needed to be questioned. It is not complicated, he said again. You just show up, every day, and do what is right, even when it is harder. Charlotte nodded, her eyes soft but clear, like someone who had finally stopped looking outward and started looking inward. And if no one sees it, she asked. Ethan smiled faintly. Then it matters even more. The words settled into her in a way no boardroom ever had, no deal ever could. She turned slightly, looking back at the black SUVs, the silent figures, the world she had built, and for a moment, it all felt distant, like something she could step away from without losing herself. Then she looked back at Ethan. I do not want to change your life, she said. I want to be part of the truth you already live. Ethan studied her, not for status, not for power, but for sincerity, and what he saw was not the woman who had arrived earlier pretending to be someone else, but someone who had finally chosen to be exactly who she was. Then you start the same way everyone does, he said. One honest choice at a time. Lily smiled, her voice light but certain. You can come back tomorrow, she said. Charlotte looked at her, then at Ethan, and for the first time, her smile stayed. I would like that, she replied. The wind moved gently through the lot, carrying away the last traces of the day, leaving only the quiet presence of something new beginning. One by one, the suited men stepped back, returning to the vehicles without a word, doors closing softly, engines starting without urgency, as if even they understood this was no longer their moment. Charlotte remained where she was, no longer surrounded, no longer elevated, just standing in the same space as Ethan and Lily, equal in something that had nothing to do with wealth. The headlights faded as the SUVs pulled away, the lot returning to its familiar stillness, but it was not the same stillness as before. Ethan picked up Lily's bike, steadying it as she climbed on, her laughter light against the quiet night. He looked once more at Charlotte. We open at 7, he said. She nodded. I will be here. And as Ethan walked beside his daughter toward the small road that led home, not faster, not slower, just steady, Charlotte stood watching, not with possession, not with ambition, but with something far rarer, understanding, and in that final moment, with no applause, no announcement, no need for anything more, the world did not cheer. It simply fell silent, because sometimes the greatest truth does not demand attention, it earns it.